nature is my sort of the thing I look to when I'm doing art. I'm not thinking about it necessarily; it just is. So I'll go on walks and sort of find my inspiration there, but I'm not thinking about it. It's just sort of, it comes through me on the paper. I've always been aware of nature. It's a place that's always been very important to me ever since I was a little girl. Growing up in the Northern California, the creeks were very important. It's where I played. The feeling of the rocks and the water at my feet, the sound of the trees. Birds were extraordinarily important to me as a little girl. And so I've just carried that throughout my life, and that's sort of where I've sort of felt at one, was in nature, in the parks, by the beach, and just observing. I think the way I can get to that answer is that it's a process for me, sort of laying things out, the paper I'm working with or the objects that are appealing to me. I don't have a plan ever. It's a place I just sit and let it come, and sort of not unlike my nature walks where I have no control over it. It's just what comes into the sightlines. And sort of as I'm pasting pieces of paper down or cutting them up or tearing them, there's a moment that I dissolve, that I can't really pay attention to the separation of the piece that's in front of me or where I am. And there's nothing but that moment. And that's so that it's a floating, and it's a place of just being. Mm-hmm. I think I'm not aware of it till after it's done. I think that is, and then I'm present that I've gone somewhere else. It's sort of like, afterwards, it's the after effect that then I'm aware of where I went. But I'm not aware of it. I think that the only thing I can think of is there's this just sheer lightening. I mean, that's a word that comes to mind. There's a lightening of my body, and my energy lifts, and then I know I'm able to move within the thing I'm creating. So it and I become sort of this dance of one thing that's a floating. That's what it feels like. For me, it's I didn't understand the importance of my own practice, my own art making. I didn't understand it until I started meditating on a regular basis. And it's at that point that I felt a connection to others through my art, which before it always felt very independent. It felt like something like breathing for me, that there was not a reason for doing it necessarily. I grew up in an artist family, so I recognized the importance of art. So that was never confusing for me or a struggle for me to understand the value of art. But understanding the value of my art was about connecting to people and connecting a message of pausing and of sort of an experiential thing that is that sort of outside. It's a place to get to together. I think that's the best way for me to describe it. I've always found, we all see art in different ways, and we all take things from an object that we see, be it a painting, a sculpture. We're going to see things, we're going to bring all of our own things to it. But if we can come together and pause in that moment, I think we've reached someplace very special. Oh, years of meditating. At first, when I started meditating, I couldn't understand what I was doing on the pillow. I couldn't understand sort of the connection to others or the value it brought to the world. It was hard for me to wrap my head around that because I was so involved with the process. So I think that's the connection, it's about the process. It's about what we're exploring and sort of this connection of appreciation and contemplation and being. It's there. That somehow connects us. It wasn't until maybe a decade ago or so, maybe 7 years ago, that I started showing my art. I've always had a practice ever since I was small. I've always made art. It has been something that my father would say, do a piece of art a day, so that I always have done art. So, but I've always done it in isolation, so it's been a very private thing, and I think most artists, do work in some sense of solitude, but I didn't have the sharing and a critique in the same way that people do that go to art school. So I'm making art alone. So it's when I began to show my art, watch people look at my art, hear people's reflections about my art, things they saw that was just fascinating to me. And then then the meditation practice, then the sitting, and understanding that there is a connection. What I'm doing has importance because there's a connection that is not, I didn't set out to have that connection. It has come through the sharing of my work. It's fun. I think it's somewhat of a game for me. It's not something I take personally or I think it's a curiosity. That's a better word for it. It's a curiosity of hearing how people see things and might see something that I put out, and it's very special. I couldn't breathe if I wasn't making art. There have been times in my life when I haven't been making art, and I suffer. My thoughts suffer, my ability to be kind in the world suffers. And when I've forgotten for a period of time and I've moved on through the world, I sometimes remember when I say, oh, that's what's wrong with me. I haven't made anything. I haven't made, that's what my problem is. And so for me, there have been times that I'm very aware of not making and the impact that it has on me in relating to others or being able to sort of move freely in my world. If I were to take a child to a place to really understand creativity and art, for me, art, the place I would start is spread out a big piece of white paper on the floor in the kitchen and have some options there, some colored pencils, some crayons, some scissors, some glue, just feathers, a few rocks, and maybe some food that makes color, some beats. And I would play. I would let them play. I've recently stopped. I've taken myself off of social media. I've taken myself away from the television. I barely listen to the radio and the news, and people think it's political of me. They think it's avoidance maybe or something like that. And for me, it's about creativity. It's about really paying attention and really being aware of this sort of thing we go through, this sort of human connection, but it's also sort of just what comes up. It's the surfacing of things, and it allows me to have experiences that are much more genuine, and I'm aware of things that, I'm almost aware that I'm missing things now in a way that's more severe than before. The creative imperative to me means there's a must for being creative. a do or die about creativity. The creative imperative is sort of part of a soul and a necessity.